Hello! Welcome to Grim Reaper Paranormal. Thank you for checking out our channel. This is case number 719. When we think of campgrounds, we think of serene forests, families, tents, travel trailers, campfires, and s'mores, which is probably the best. But we do not think of spirits and apparitions in those things that go bump in the night. In this episode, we are focusing on one particular campground located in eastern Massachusetts. Names and locations have been changed in order to protect those that are involved. This particular case took place in July of 2020. Some cases are more personal to me than others. This one was no exception, as it involved family and really good friends. We were on a camping trip over to the Boston area. There is a campground over there, which I will say is within a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes from Boston. It sits right near one of the highways that heads down towards the Cape. As we were getting within close proximity of our campground, we made our final turn to head to the campground. There's a haunted house on the left-hand side. When I first saw it, I was excited as I knew of its long history, which dates back all the way to the Revolution and the folklore that surrounds it. This location has been around since the Revolution. It is a yellow two-story Victorian, which dates back to Revolutionary times. Those of you that are listening to this video that are from Northeast United States, particularly Massachusetts, will remember that last year was brutally hot temperature, 90, 95, 100, 104 degrees. The day that we arrived was 104 degrees and it was brutally hot outside. This particular trip was a week-long adventure around the Boston area. We were meeting up with a large group of friends at this particular campground. Several hours after we arrived and finally had our site all set up and everything pulled out of the back of my truck and ready to go, I took my dog for a walk to the dog park, which was at the end of the loop. This dog park in particular sits next to a forested area. The fencing which separated the dog park and the forest, you can see ivy and of course the usual foliage that you would see in any dense forest. Lots and lots of trees which you have a very hard time seeing through. Within several minutes, stepping foot within this dog park, I had the feeling that I was being watched. It was a 90-degree day outside, and my body hair was standing up on edge. I knew that I was not alone. The question is, what was watching me? As I played with our dog high in the woods, and I knew that there were spirits that were out there. For several days, regardless if it was morning, afternoon, evening, or late at night around midnight, as I would routinely walk our dog around the campground late at night with a flashlight. When I got to this particular area, or the area where there is a large field, which I will be talking about in a few minutes, I had the same feeling. I knew I was being watched. I knew I was being watched from within the woods. The question was, what was in there? On one of the last nights that we were all together, we had a large potluck dinner between 6 different families, which consisted of 8 to 10 adults and 6 kids. This is where the story continues. After we all had dinner, the kids went off to go play in the field which was right in front of us. Now this is a good sized field, at least a good 7 to 10 acres, somewhere within that size. Us adults sat around the fire, just chilling out, relaxing, while the kids were off in the field playing. It was a warm summer night. The moon was in the sky. It was in the low 80s outside. I could see Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune all within close proximity of the moon. The large field that was in front of us is pretty much surrounded by woods on every side. Our kids were playing in the field, ranged in age from 6 to 11 years old. And they were just playing the usual kids games as they ran around. They were shooting rocket copters up in the air. And those of you out there that have kids, I'm sure you are well aware of what rocket copters are. To those of you who do not have kids, rocket copters is a toy you shoot up in the air. A lot of them have an LED light on them, and it comes down like a helicopter and twirls down to the ground. So there's 6 kids shooting rocket copters in the air. My dog is running around the field chasing her ball, and my daughter was using one of my laser pointers to get my dog to run back and forth through this particular field. Now there was a lot of noise from the kids playing in the field. Colored lights, lots of energy that was in the air, some screaming from the running back and forth. After an undetermined period of time, maybe a half an hour, I didn't really keep track of time other than I knew that it was late. The rest of us were sitting over by the campfire when all the kids came running over, my daughter being one of them. All of them looked excited, yet shocked. My daughter said to me, "Hey Daddy, guess what?" So I asked her what, and they all said pretty much in unison, "We just saw 3 ghosts," which immediately perked my interest. All of the kids were so excited over what they saw. I would not really say they were scared, but they were pretty pumped over what they had definitely experienced. I asked my daughter to come sit down. All the kids came over and pretty much sat next to her. And I asked each one of them, one at a time, what they saw using their own words. All of them pretty much said the same thing. They saw a young girl wearing a yellowish, greenish dress, and her face was whited out. There was a taller man who was tall. I'm 6'4", and according to my daughter, he was much taller than me. So I will say, as an estimation, he was 6'6" to 7 feet tall. There was a shorter man, which according to the kid, I will say, was under 5 feet tall. Both of the male apparitions were wearing black and white styled attire, much akin to the late 17 and or 1800s. Both of them also had their faces completely whited out. Every child's description pretty much matched between the color of the dress the little girl was wearing, the tall apparition, the short apparition, and all of them having no face. There were no words that were said. They just kind of appeared out of a white mist and manifested in front of all the kids. My daughter told me that the incident took place within the middle of the field, which I was pretty surprised over, but was well within the area as towards where I started getting the feeling that I was being watched, and I knew that I was not alone. The kids told me that they saw it a second time. This time it was behind a rock wall. I asked the kids where the second incident took place, and they said it was within a minute or so of the first incident, except now it was closer towards where this rock wall was and where the forest was. My daughter said the little girl was sitting up on a tree branch, maybe a good 8 to 10 feet above the ground. The 2 other gentlemen were peeking around, watching the kids. They could see their whited out faces, and they could make out a portion of their outfit behind the tree. Before we left for vacation, I packed one of my ghost bags, as my daughter likes to call them. I have a bunch of different cases and/or bags, like most paranormal investigators have, each for different types of equipment. This was no exception, as I did bring equipment with me. when I was over there on vacation. I had other different locations scouted out, getting different video clips and EVPs at multiple different sites located in and around the Boston area. I opened up the door, ran inside, and pulled out one of my bags. I grabbed a flashlight, a digital recorder, a K2 meter, and extra batteries. As I rode my bike back over towards where everybody was gathered, I dropped my bike off, grabbed the equipment that I had in my pockets, and started walking across the field. Within a minute or two, I was within sight of the rock wall. The kids wanted to come over with me and hang out, and I told them no, I want to do this alone, because they were obviously very loud and I did not want them to contaminate any of the EVP samples that I was trying to obtain over their yelling and screaming. When I got over to the rock wall, I introduced myself. I was not there to hurt them. I just wished to communicate and learn more about them. Each and every investigation is different. This one, since I only had a limited amount of equipment, I started right away with thinking of questions to ask. As I pulled the K2 meter out of my pocket, I turned it on and watched as the lights flickered and put it down on the ground. I pulled out my digital recorder, started recording, mentioning what the date was, what time it was, rough idea of the temperature and meteorological conditions that I was noticing. In this particular case, there was no wind outside other than the humidity which was hanging in the air. Some of the questions that I asked were if they could tell me their name and to please speak into the device that is within my hand. Since I cannot hear you, the device will allow me to hear you. I asked if they were from the Boston area. I asked if they were farmers, or if they were pilgrims, or if they were born in the 1700s. At this point, I could feel a cold breeze gently coming around my ankles. I looked at the trees, but there was no trees moving. I started asking if they were around during the time of the Revolution or the Boston Massacre. I started getting better responses when I started questioning about if they were born in the early 1800s. It was at this point that I looked down at the K2 meter and it was not lit. I bent down, picked it up, and hit the power button, which turned it off and turned it back on. The batteries were dead. I reached into my pocket, grabbed a screwdriver, and quickly changed the batteries, turned it back on, and put it on the ground. Now, I've had this happen many times over the years, and I'm so glad that I had extra batteries in my pocket. I repeated my line of questioning, asking if they were born in or around revolutionary times and the Boston Massacre, or were they born in the early 1800s. The cool breeze, which was around my ankles, was slowly working its way up my legs, to my waist, up my back, and over my shoulders. It was a surreal feeling, looking back on it now. At this point, I took a couple different photos, probably a good 1 or 2 dozen at this point, in addition to the audio evidence I was recording from my digital recorder on the ground. I was asking if they could make the K2 meter spike. It jumped up to orange. I got another hit when I asked if they lived between the 18 to 1820s. This time, it spiked again to orange as confirmation. As I continued to snap photos, I asked other questions, like if they were a slave, or were they just passing through the area, or perhaps were they an Indian that died somewhere on the property. After I asked these questions, whatever the energy was and whatever these entities were, I could still feel, but it was not as pronounced as it was during our initial contact. I said to them, please do not frighten the children because the kids are scared. And a couple of the kids, even though they were excited, they were a little scared. They didn't want to go back in the field afterwards to play. Please do not frighten the children. They are scared. Please do not frighten the children. They are scared. Please do not frighten the children. They are scared. I thanked them for their time in communicating with me before I left to head back over to my friends. I took pictures upon my return as I sat around the campfire. Since it was such a beautiful night, I can vividly remember seeing what looked like a face inside of the smoke coming off of the fire. Now I will post this picture at this point. What I would like everybody to do is look at the photo, and in the comments below, please leave a response as to what you think you see. I still felt as if the spirits were watching us from deep within the woods. For the remainder of our stay, every time I was within this area, at the dog park and along the rock wall, I could feel the spirits around me or watching me from within the woods. On our last day that we were there, prior to leaving for our drive home, I walked our dog back over to the dog park. Just like the first instance that I stepped foot on the dog park, I felt as if I was being watched. As I sat there while my dog played around in the dog park, I was asking different questions, saying to please not be afraid and to please come to the device in my hand and speak to me. In this particular case, I was using my cell phone. After several minutes of sitting there, I turned around and started to peer towards the woods, looking through the different thick vegetation which was in front of me towards my left as I saw the forest, trying to think, where would I be? Where would I hide? It could be almost anywhere, the vegetation was so thick, but I could definitely feel as if I was being watched. Just before I left, I opened up the dog park door. At the time, it was around midday. Nobody was around, but I said out loud goodbye to them, and I will be back at a later date to conduct more investigations. I said to them they are not welcome to follow me home, but I will be back. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button below. We're a new channel. We're trying to grow it, get our name out there. Before we conclude, I have one question for you. Are you going to think differently about campgrounds now when you go there? Are you ready to journey and peer into the darkness? Please do not frighten the children. They are scared. Please do not frighten the children. They are scared. Please do not frighten the children. They are scared. It has been over 1 year since my stay at this particular campground. Between that time frame and the making of this video, a lot of thought has been given as to whether or not I think this campground is in fact truly haunted. I really do believe this campground is haunted. There is clearly spirits that are located there that are on the property and that lurk in the darkness. That is a given based on what I experienced and the evidence that I was able to capture in the time frame that I was there. Because of the pandemic, I have not been able to go back as of yet to conduct further investigations